Many people have expressed a concern about development leading to urban sprawl. How do you feel about high-rise buildings in Burlington? Should the 10-story limit be increased?
Well, this goes back to my original, my earlier comments about, Burlington's going to change, and I think we just need to do it in a sustainable way in terms of development. I don't see a problem with increasing heights in Burlington, and not dramatically, but in small ways to help build more density downtown. Because again, in 10 years, if we're really looking at the broader picture, as people retire and as the population might grow, we need to be building density rather than building out further into sprawls. When I'm out in Williston, I always really kind of question the wisdom of building out into all these fields with more individual houses. So while I don't want Burlington to turn into a huge city with 20-story buildings, I think there is some room to grow in smart ways that, I'm not an architect, but that kind of step in the heights of buildings so that we're not building just straight up that block the sky and block all sorts of things and make it feel more of a metropolitan area, but are built in sustainable ways that help to give us that extra height, that extra density in downtown Burlington, but does not take away from the quality of life, the views of the lake, all of the great aspects of what Burlington is. So I think, again, I am definitely not opposed to change, and I am not opposed to making sure that Burlington can build density downtown. So I think there's ways to go about it that can really balance people who are nervous about any sort of change in downtown Burlington or height with the realities of what we're facing in 10 years, because we have to do something.
I remember 3 years ago in the mayoral campaign, there was one candidate that wanted to put housing out in the Intervale because he didn't like high-rises. And I thought about that. I live in a 10-story building, and I think being in the center of the city in a 10-story building is an ideal situation because I can walk to everything. And if it were 15 stories, I think that would work equally well. But imagine if I had to live out in the Intervale. Every time I went out, I would have to take my car and use foreign oil. And yeah, I think it's so much better if the city can build up rather than spread out into an ugly sprawl.
Absolutely. And if you think about just the realities of, again, basic needs, when you're in a building that's surrounded by other people, just your heating bills, your, the lack of the lower transportation costs that you would have when you're closer into the urban, central part of the city, all of those different pieces help bring people's basic needs down. And if we really want to look at helping people be able to be more self-sufficient and being able to meet their family's basic needs, those are all things that help. When we build housing that actually brings people together rather than individual places, especially out in the Intervale and more sprawl, that's much more sustainable in the long run, not to mention much more environmentally sound. I live on Oak Street, which is right on the edge of the Intervale, and it is a beautiful a piece of land that in my mind should really be preserved as much as possible so that people can farm, that we can recreate right in the city of Burlington, instead of having to get into our cars to drive to go out to the mountains and to enjoy any sort of greenery. We have this real gem of the Intervale right there. So to compromise that is just something that I would not be comfortable with in the sake of developing more and more housing in that location.
Good. Do you see the internet as an important part of the infrastructure required for development? What can be done to increase internet access in Burlington?
I think Burlington Telecom has been a great new step, and it's still so new. When we think about, and I wasn't even alive when Burlington Electric Department started, but I think a public utility is really, especially around communication, is really the smart way to go. We need to just keep investing and moving forward with that so that it can become a stronger company, a stronger telecommunications service for folks. And I think once we get to all places in Burlington, it also could become something that can go into other communities to help, pay back Burlington residents and help it even make it a more financially viable program. I think that's the intent of that effort right now. But I think the internet, communication, we are in a new communication age, and we need to make sure that the internet is accessible to more people. Not everyone still has computers, and not everyone there'll always be part of the population that doesn't have immediate home access. So thinking about ways to also expand just the physical access that people have to computers and the internet. The Multi-Generation Center in the heart of Ward 2 is a great place to maybe build upon that to give people more access other than just Fletcher Free Library. So while getting internet to everyone's home is important, I think it's also important to make sure that we are building access for people who don't have or won't ever have the resources to have a computer at home or to have that internet hookup at home. But on a city level too, I think it's as we look at how to keep people informed about what's going on in the city, looking just at the city's own way of using the internet in terms of our website as a city needs a complete overhaul, if you ask me. And this might be a generational thing as well, but I think young people look to wanting to access things on the internet, and more, even people who are my parents' age are looking for websites to be able to gain the basic things that everyone might need. So getting a form from City Hall, if they can download it from the city website, that is much more accessible than having to find time to get down to City Hall during their operating hours to get whatever form you need. Or having simple answers, simple questions answered. There's ways that we can build a website that's more user-friendly, that's more informative, and that's more helpful, if you will, for making sure people can just access their city and get questions answered in a more efficient way. So that's actually a second thing that I would really want to push the city to work on, is kind of looking at all of the different ways that we communicate on a web level and making sure that the city has one unified, helpful, well-structured website.
Even though I live in the very center of the city, I have 3 computers, but I don't have internet access. So far, Burlington Telecom hasn't offered their service to the center of the city. I would think there would be something that could be done about that. And I used to get Wi-Fi access to the internet in my apartment because being on the 6th floor and being surrounded by the city, there are a number of Wi-Fi transmitters, but each one has this little security code. Yeah. So after a little while, I found that I could no longer get the Wi-Fi connection. I wonder if the city couldn't provide Wi-Fi availability in the center of the city so that people in the big buildings could get it, free access, and maybe do something about speeding up the Burlington Telecom
bandwidth or whatever it is. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think one of the things, especially in cities that, bigger cities, larger cities, that is attractive for lots of reasons is creating these hot spots. We do this already on some of the rest areas in Burlington, or not Burlington, but in Vermont. And I think definitely in a central location, especially around the heart of Church Street in particular, to really help draw people further, giving people even more reason to come downtown and to enjoy Church Street would be to create perhaps a free public hotspot where people could access free Wi-Fi. It's something that I think would be a great public service to people, so that people who are visiting or people who are in housing that's within that urban area, it's again all building around this kind of central part of the city, so people can have access to a basic service. As we keep going into this internet age, I think it's just going to become more and more of a necessity to make sure people have access, and that would be another way the city could do that.